Spiritism centers around two essential beliefs. One is that people believe there is a soul, and the other is that people believe in God. If one believes that we do have a soul, that the soul is immortal, and one believes that God exists, that God has facilitated all that we have, then one is open to believing in Spiritism. That is, in the underlying premise of Spiritism is a belief in reincarnation, but also it embraces Christianity. But I would also stress that it doesn't exclusively embrace Christianity. It emphasizes the teachings of Jesus. But one could have another religious background, because people who believe in reincarnation come from many different cultures. Reincarnation has got a long history in Buddhism, for instance, and in other religions. Reincarnation is, many of the world's major religions believe in reincarnation to some extent. Do they believe it wholeheartedly? It depends on the individual, it depends on the religion. But there's room for belief in reincarnation, maybe not directly in traditional Christianity, but there's at least a door open for that. There are aspects of Judaism that embrace reincarnation, the Kabbalah, for instance. Buddhism believes in reincarnation and so forth. So reincarnation did not, the belief in reincarnation or the idea of it certainly did not originate with Kardec or with the creation of the Spiritist doctrine, which was back in the 1850s into the 1860s. People have often felt that there was a lot of truth to this. And I think one of the things that appeals to me personally is the argument that in order for us to believe in reincarnation, we have to feel that our purpose here on earth has more meaning behind it than just we are born and we grow up in this life and we find a job and we raise families if we do, and we go through the various struggles that we have in our day-to-day lives, and then we reach the end, and then that's it. And the argument that Kardec emphasizes is that in terms of what drives us to strive for progress, why do we try to progress? Why do we take morality seriously? Why do we try to improve at all? If we really only have one shot in life and that's it, then why does anybody really bother to improve? Because if one believes that there's really no purpose to our lives beyond this immediate life, then it kind of makes one wonder, do people really need to keep striving to improve? And yet humanity keeps progressing. So what really drives that? Why do we keep striving for moral progress of some kind? Why do we try to improve our physical existence in terms of all the scientific advances that have occurred? Why are people so naturally curious? Something is driving all of this that is, I think, goes beyond this immediate existence that we have. And so Spiritism tries to focus on that. Another thing that Spiritism does is that, I mentioned before that Christianity, certainly there are doors open in Christianity to believe in reincarnation. Jesus, for instance, mentioned that John the Baptist, people had asked Jesus, did Elijah come back? And Jesus said, yes, Elijah did come back. He was John the Baptist. Now that quote from Jesus is often cited in Spiritism as an example of where Jesus was hinting that reincarnation exists. And yet Christianity, traditional Christianity, doesn't really embrace it, but at the same time, it does talk about the existence of a soul. It talks about people going to heaven or going to hell and so forth. So what does that really mean? You know, does that mean that everything just ends after this life? So for some people at least, there may be a bit of a disconnect in terms of, on the one hand, believing that the soul is immortal, that we do have more than one opportunity to improve. But at the same time, it's sort of unclear as to how much many people who are not Spiritists, for instance, really believe in that. Actually, I would say that a lot of people in Spiritism or outside of Spiritism do believe that in reincarnation, and it's a widely held belief. It is essential in Spiritism to follow the teachings of Jesus. It's one of the core foundations of Spiritism. Spiritism is a combination of religion, philosophy, and science. That's how it describes itself. The religious part of it is the teachings of Jesus. Therefore, the Gospel according to Spiritism, for instance, is frequently quoting from the New Testament, especially Matthew, and is emphasizing the teachings of Jesus. What Spiritism does so is that it tries to delve very deeply into what Jesus was alluding to and what some of Jesus's values and teachings are. And I don't think that the conclusions that are derived from Spiritism's interpretation of Jesus are really inconsistent with traditional Christian thought, generally speaking. And also, and this is really important, is that the teachings that are emphasized by Spiritism through its interpretation of Jesus are very universal. It really focuses much more on the core values of Jesus, which are universal. And so one does not have to be a Christian, I would argue, in order to follow these teachings. This is a bit of a provocative point to bring up, but I'll do it anyway. Do you have to believe in the Holy Trinity in order to be a Spiritist? I would say no. Many people, I'm sure, do, especially if they come from Catholic backgrounds, but it's not a prerequisite to being a Spiritist. Is it a prerequisite to being a Christian? You know, that's for individuals to decide. But more importantly are the core values of what Jesus is teaching us. Sometimes the spirit world and spirits have insights that can be useful to us in terms of the ways in which we can understand things. If one is a Spiritist, one believes that the spirit world is just as important, if not more important, than this one. That does not mean that you constantly try to live in the spirit world. We need to be here in our bodies, we need to be here on earth. But the more we understand what the spirit world appears to be, based upon what we've been told by spirits, then the more we think about life in terms of a much longer term. We're not just thinking about it in terms of the single lifetime that we have here. It also, I think, helps people to be less afraid of death. That Spiritism emphasizes that death is really just a transition from one world into the next. It's understandable that people are afraid of death. I mean, of course, but at the same time, one doesn't have to be, especially if one has really done everything possible to lead as ethical a life as possible. And Spiritism strongly emphasizes the ethical, that we need to do what is good as much as possible. We need to try to treat others with compassion and kindness as much as possible, and go through our lives not causing problems with others, and hopefully not for ourselves as well. I've had interest in reincarnation for a long time. I don't know why that happened. It's just, I remember from my 20s, early 20s, there was just something about it that intrigued me. I didn't know much about it. I think probably like a lot of Americans, I was introduced to Spiritism by knowing a Brazilian. In this case, I'm married to a Brazilian woman. And so for her, Spiritism was very common. And of course, many Brazilians either are Spiritists or know of it. And it kind of happened gradually in terms of getting more involved with going to centers and things like that. And then I would say over the last 15 years or so, it became more a part of my life. The more I began to understand Spiritism, the more it really spoke to me. I think the important thing about Spiritism is that it takes a long time to really understand. a lot of what it's saying. And it's an ongoing process. I mean, we think we understand something, and we might at the moment, but then you leave life for a while, and then you go back and you read something you maybe read a while ago, and it has a different meaning to you altogether, or it has a different resonance that is that makes more sense.